Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into a really, really heavy topic.
Yeah.
Corruption in Jamaica.
hmm
And we've got all these reports and analyses, and it shows how this affects, every aspect of life there.
Absolutely.
So our mission today is to really understand not just like what corruption is,
Right.
but like why is it so entrenched in Jamaica? And, is there any hope for change?
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to unpack all of that. We'll look at the causes, the consequences, and see if there's, a possibility of a brighter future.
Yeah, I think it's a complex issue for sure, and it's easy to get lost in all the negative aspects of it. But I think it's crucial to understand that corruption in Jamaica, it's not just about a few bad actors, right? We're talking about like systemic weaknesses. It's like a house built on a really shaky foundation.
So you're saying the system itself is kind of vulnerable. What makes these foundations so shaky?
Well, Transparency International, that's the global anti-corruption watchdog, they flagged a ton of serious issues in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Particularly the lack of judicial independence.
Right.
And transparency. I mean, imagine yourself trying to seek justice in a system where cases drag on for years.
Right.
And decisions seem influenced by, who you know rather than the actual law.
Yeah.
It's a recipe for disillusionment and just this feeling of powerlessness.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you can't trust the system to deliver justice, I can see how people would lose faith and even resort to corrupt practices themselves. But is it just about the courts?
No. I mean, economic inequality plays a massive role too.
Okay.
Think of it like a seesaw. On one end, you've got, a small, wealthy elite who can basically exploit the system for their own gain. On the other end, you've got the majority of Jamaicans, they're struggling just to make ends meet, often forced to resort to bribery just to survive.
So on one hand, you've got the people that have the means to manipulate the system.
Right.
And on the other, you have people who are so desperate.
Yeah.
They feel they have no other choice. It creates this like vicious cycle.
Exactly. And it's not just a theoretical concept, right? I mean, there are real-life examples of this disparity everywhere. Imagine an ordinary Jamaican who has to, bribe a hospital worker just to see a doctor.
Right.
While, someone wealthy can just secure a contract for, say, road repairs. It ends up costing way more than it should, and you just end up with more potholes.
Yeah. It's frustrating to think about those contrasting realities. And then there's the political angle. Is it really as bad as some reports suggest?
Political manipulation is a major issue in Jamaica.
Okay.
And it's not just about, a few shady deals here and there.
Right.
We're talking about like a deeply ingrained culture of vote buying with politicians, they're doling out favors or even cash in exchange for support. Then you have, dubious contracts awarded to companies with political connections. And there are even allegations of links between politicians and, powerful criminal figures. They call them dons.
Okay, hold on. That sounds more like a crime thriller than reality.
Right.
Are you saying that these connections are real and widespread?
There's evidence to suggest that it's not just, isolated incidents.
Right.
These dons often control, entire communities. And politicians will often turn a blind eye to their activities, or they'll even collaborate with them, in exchange for influence and votes.
Yeah.
And this creates a very dangerous blur, between legitimate power and criminal networks.
So you're saying that corruption in Jamaica isn't just about individual actions. It's woven into the fabric of how the system works.
Absolutely.
From the courts and the economy to the political landscape.
Yeah, and that makes finding solutions, it makes it even more challenging. But before we get to those, there's one more piece of this puzzle we need to address.
Okay.
And it's a big one.
Okay, I'm ready. Lay on me.
It's estimated that a staggering 3 trillion Jamaican dollars, that's a trillion with a T,
Wow.
have vanished from the public sector.
Okay.
That's money meant for hospitals, for schools, for roads, everything that should be improving the lives of Jamaicans.
Wow. That's a mind-boggling amount of money.
It is.
Where did it all go?
Well, investigations have revealed huge gaps in accounting systems. You have projects that either, ballooned way over budget or just disappeared.
Wow.
And there's a serious lack of proper auditing.
So it's not just about a few, corrupt individuals pocketing money.
Right.
It suggests a system that's failing to track and manage public funds.
Exactly.
Which allows corruption to thrive.
Exactly. And the consequences are felt by every Jamaican. Think about what could have been achieved, with that money if it was invested properly.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a pretty bleak picture so far. But surely institutions like the police and the military are above this kind of corruption, right?
You'd hope so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But sadly, even institutions like the Jamaica Constabulary Force, the JCF,
right, and
the Jamaica Defense Force, JDF, they're not immune to this. There have been so many reports of police officers being accused of, everything from accepting bribes to colluding with gangs, turning a blind eye, or even engaging in misconduct themselves.
That's a bit unsettling. If you can't even trust the people that are supposed to protect you, who can you trust?
Right. It's a question that a lot of Jamaicans are grappling with. And, this vulnerability, it's not limited to personal safety, right?
Right.
It affects critical areas like healthcare, which is already struggling.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've heard a lot about the crisis in Jamaica's healthcare system. How does corruption factor into that?
Imagine a hospital on life support, right? Struggling just to function. That's basically what corruption has done to Jamaica's healthcare system.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about, these abstract budget numbers.
Right.
It's about real people, real lives being affected. Think about the recent doctor's strike, for example.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. Wasn't there a tragic case of a young girl who died during that strike?
Yes.
Because she couldn't get treatment in time?
A 14-year-old pregnant girl.
Yeah.
It was just heartbreaking, a consequence of a system that had just reached its breaking point.
Yeah.
The strike itself was just a symptom of deeper issues.
Right.
Unresolved wage disputes, terrible working conditions for healthcare professionals, and just a general lack of resources.
And all of this fueled by corruption, diverting funds.
Yeah.
That should be going towards essential services and equipment, like a domino effect.
Exactly. And it's not limited to one sector.
No.
Even something as seemingly mundane as transportation.
Okay.
Is affected by corruption. Think about the state of Jamaica's roads. Bumpy, pothole-ridden.
Right.
Often dangerous. That's a reflection of what's happening within the Transport Authority.
So it's not just about bad roads, it's about corruption within the institution?
Exactly.
That's responsible for maintaining them?
Precisely.
Wow.
Reports suggest that officials within the Transport Authority have been accepting bribes in exchange for driver's licenses.
Really?
Yeah, putting unqualified drivers on the roads.
Wow.
And funds that should be allocated to road improvements and safety measures, they're often diverted or misused.
That raises serious concerns about the safety of, everyone on the roads. If you knew that safety standards were compromised because of corruption, would you feel comfortable driving in Jamaica?
It's a question every Jamaican has to ask themselves. And, this erosion of trust, it extends to the heart of the justice system as well.
You're talking about the case of Paula Llewellyn.
Yeah.
The director of public prosecutions who was removed and then reinstated.
Yeah.
That whole situation, it seemed very suspicious.
It certainly raised eyebrows. The timing of her removal, it coincided with appeals in the high-profile Vibis cartel case.
Yeah.
It led many to believe that there were political motivations at play.
Right, yeah. There were rumors that the government was trying to influence the outcome of that case, and then her sudden reinstatement just added to the confusion. It created this perception that the justice system was being manipulated for political gain.
Exactly. And even if there was no wrongdoing, even the perception of interference, it's enough to damage public trust.
Right.
In the judiciary. It makes people question whether justice is truly blind in Jamaica.
Okay, so we've seen how corruption has permeated the courts, the economy.
Politics, law enforcement, healthcare, even transportation.
Yeah.
Is there any area of Jamaican life that's untouched by this?
Sadly, it seems like corruption has cast a really long shadow over many aspects of Jamaican society.
Yeah.
But before we get into potential solutions, there's one more critical aspect we need to consider.
Okay.
And it's often overlooked.
I'm all ears. What is it?
It's the role of ordinary citizens. We often think of corruption as something that happens up there, right, in government or big business.
Right.
But the reality is that every Jamaican plays a role.
Okay.
Even unintentionally.
Are you saying that everyday people are partly to blame for this?
Not to blame necessarily, but we're all part of the system, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes our own actions, however small they may seem, can perpetuate the cycle of corruption. think back to that seesaw analogy, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes those on the lower end, those struggling to survive, they feel so desperate. They resort to bribery just to get by. So it's not always about greed or malice. It's about people trying to navigate a system that feels rigged against them.
Exactly. And then there's also this pervasive culture of getting things done, where people feel like they have to cut corners or pay bribes just to navigate bureaucracy or access basic services.
Right, like those small bribes to expedite a driver's license or get a permit approved.
Exactly.
It seems harmless on an individual level, but when everybody does it,
right, it becomes normalized.
Yeah.
And that normalization contributes to the larger problem.
Right.
These seemingly small acts of corruption, they add up.
Yeah.
And they fuel a system that ultimately hurts everyone.
Okay, so individual citizens, they do play a role, but it's not just about assigning blame.
Right.
It's about understanding how we're all interconnected in this system.
Precisely. And that understanding is crucial as we start to explore, what can be done to combat corruption in Jamaica. It's not just about top-down solutions.
Right.
It requires a shift in mindset and a collective effort from all levels of society.
This has been a lot to process, and I'm sure our listeners is feeling the weight of it too.
Yeah.
But I'm also sensing a glimmer of hope in that idea of collective action.
Yeah.
If corruption is a systemic problem, maybe the solution needs to be systemic as well.
That's a great point, and that's exactly where we'll pick up in the next part of this deep dive. We're going to explore what's already being done to combat corruption in Jamaica. And we'll also look at what other countries in the Caribbean have learned in their own fights against this complex issue.
So join us next time as we delve into potential solutions and explore whether a brighter future is possible for Jamaica.
Welcome back to the Deep Dives. In the last part, we kind of painted a pretty stark picture of how corruption has kind of permeated Jamaican society. And it can be disheartening, but it's important to remember that this is an ongoing battle.
Absolutely.
And there are people, fighting back. So today, let's shift gears a bit.
And explore some of the efforts being made to combat this issue and maybe find some glimmers of hope.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's easy to get caught up in the negativity, but there are definitely positive developments happening.
Okay.
One area where we're seeing progress is in public awareness and citizen engagement.
That's encouraging to hear. It feels, citizen action is key because it's one thing to have laws and policies. Yeah. But it's another thing entirely to have a population that's actively engaged in holding their leaders accountable.
You hit the nail on the head. There are several organizations in Jamaica that are working really, really hard to raise awareness about the harmful effects of corruption and, empower citizens to demand better governance.
Can you give us some examples? I'm always inspired by stories of people fighting for change.
Yeah. One organization that's doing really great work is the National Integrity Action.
Okay.
Or NIA.
NIA, okay.
They're a non-governmental organization, and they advocate for transparency, accountability, and good governance.
Okay.
And they do, they conduct research, they educate the public, and they lobby for policy reforms to address corruption.
So they're acting as kind of like watchdogs, keeping a close eye on the government and pushing for greater transparency in areas like, campaign financing and public procurement.
Precisely. And they've had some significant wins, like they played a key role in advocating for the passage of the Access to Information Act.
That's huge. Access to information is so important for holding those in power accountable. It's much harder to hide corruption when everything's out in the open.
Right.
What other initiatives are out there?
Another important player is the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal.
Okay.
Or JAMBAM.
Yeah.
And it's an online platform that basically tracks government performance and lets citizens see how projects and initiatives are progressing. Think of it like a scorecard. Where people can actually track how their tax dollars are being spent.
Oh, that sounds like an incredible tool for promoting transparency and holding the government accountable. Has JANP been effective?
It's been instrumental in exposing instances of wasteful spending, mismanagement of public funds.
Really?
It's even led to investigations and prosecutions in some cases.
Good.
And NIA was also key in pushing for the establishment of the Integrity Commission.
The Integrity Commission, remind me what that is again.
So it's an independent body
Yeah.
And it's tasked with investigating corruption in the public sector. You can think of it as like an internal affairs division for the government.
Okay.
So they have the power to investigate, to prosecute corruption cases. But, they faced a lot of challenges in terms of funding, staffing, and even political interference.
Ugh, that political influence again. It's a reminder that even with these, positive steps, the fight is far from over. It's good to hear about those citizen-led initiatives.
Yeah.
But what about the government itself? Are there any signs that they're taking this seriously and tackling corruption from within?
There have been some efforts, but progress has been, slow and often met with skepticism from the public. Aside from the Integrity Commission, they've implemented reforms that are aimed at strengthening procurement procedures and making the process more transparent. So this includes measures like competitive bidding and open tendering for government contracts.
So it sounds like they're trying to eliminate those shady backroom deals and ensure a level playing field. Have these reforms been successful?
There have been some positive results. For example, the government has saved millions of dollars by implementing electronic procurement systems.
It's a good reminder that technology can play a big role in fighting corruption. It makes it harder to manipulate the system when everything is tracked digitally.
Absolutely.
But we've been talking a lot about, the government. What about the role of the private sector in all of this? Don't they have a responsibility to play their part in fighting corruption?
Absolutely. The private sector plays a crucial role.
Okay.
Businesses, they have responsibility to operate ethically and transparently and to refuse to engage in corrupt practices. It's about upholding ethical standards and refusing to participate in bribery, even when it seems like the easier path.
So it's not just about the government cleaning up its act. It's about businesses doing the right thing and creating a culture of integrity.
Yeah, exactly.
Are there any examples of private sector initiatives that are making a difference?
There are some positive developments. The Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, or PSOJ, has been advocating for anti-corruption measures and ethical business practices.
Okay.
They've even developed, codes of conduct, training programs, and reporting mechanisms to encourage businesses to operate with integrity.
That's great to hear. It sounds like they're trying to set a higher standard.
Yeah.
For businesses in Jamaica.
Exactly. And they've been collaborating with the government.
Okay.
To strengthen anti-corruption legislation.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good.
So it's encouraging to see this kind of partnership with both the public and private sectors.
Yeah.
Working together towards the same goal.
Right.
And it's not just about the big players.
Right.
Small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs are really important too.
Right. SMEs are kind of the backbone of any economy.
Yeah.
But they're also often the hardest hit.
Yeah.
By corruption because they might not have the resources to navigate a corrupt system.
That's exactly why it's so critical for them to operate ethically and support initiatives that promote transparency.
Right.
And there are organizations like the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce that actually provide training and resources specifically to help SMEs implement anti-corruption policies.
That's good to hear that there's support available for smaller businesses.
Yeah.
To navigate this complex landscape. So we've got, citizen-led initiatives,
right,
government reforms, private sector engagement. Yeah. It seems like there's a growing movement pushing back against corruption in Jamaica.
Yeah.
But can Jamaica win this fight alone? What about the international community?
Yeah.
Do they have a role to play in supporting these efforts?
Absolutely. International organizations like Transparency International and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, they provide technical assistance, funding, expertise, all to help strengthen anti-corruption efforts.
So Jamaica can kind of leverage that global network of knowledge and resources.
Absolutely.
What specific forms of support can these organizations offer?
Well, they can help with things like drafting legislation, developing anti-corruption strategies, training law enforcement officials, setting up reporting mechanisms, and they can provide funding for projects that are aimed at raising public awareness and promoting transparency.
Okay.
So it's like having a team of expert consultants, working alongside the Jamaican government and civil society.
That's really encouraging. It shows that Jamaica doesn't have to, reinvent the wheel. They can learn from the successes and failures of other countries that have faced similar challenges. We talked earlier about, that staggering amount of money that has vanished from the public sector.
Yeah.
Is there any hope of recovering those stolen assets?
It's a challenging area, but international cooperation is key. Corrupt individuals often hide their ill-gotten gains in foreign bank accounts, or they'll invest in assets overseas. So it takes collaboration between law enforcement agencies, financial institutions, and governments across borders.
So it's a complex, international effort.
It is. But there have been some success stories. For example, remember Christopher Dudis's Coke? The former Tivoli Gardens strongman?
The one extradited to the U.S.
Right.
on drug trafficking charges.
As part of his plea agreement, he forfeited millions of dollars in assets.
Okay.
Some of which were actually returned to Jamaica.
So even though he was convicted in another country, some of the assets that were derived from criminal activity in Jamaica were recovered.
Right.
That's a positive sign.
It is. It demonstrates that international cooperation can be effective, in recovering stolen assets, even in really complex cases involving organized crime.
Okay, so we've seen some positive developments in terms of, citizen action,
right,
government reforms, private sector engagement, international cooperation. It feels like there's momentum building.
There is, but it's important to remember that corruption has a significant economic impact.
Okay.
We touched on this earlier.
Yeah.
But it's worth delving a bit deeper into how corruption hinders economic growth and perpetuates poverty.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We know that, corruption costs Jamaica billions of dollars.
Yeah.
But how does that actually translate into real life consequences for people?
It's a multifaceted issue. Corruption acts as a drag on economic development in multiple ways. It discourages investment, stifles innovation, and undermines fair competition.
Yeah.
So it ultimately leads to slower growth and fewer opportunities for the Jamaican people.
Let's break that down.
Yeah.
How exactly does corruption discourage investment?
Okay, well imagine you're a foreign investor and you're considering doing business in Jamaica. Yeah, you see these news reports about corruption scandals, political instability, lack of transparency. Would you feel confident putting your money into that environment?
Probably not. The risk would feel too high. It's like you said before, if you can't trust the system, why would you invest in it?
Exactly. Corruption creates uncertainty and risk, which makes investors wary.
Right.
They'd rather invest their capital in countries with, a stronger track record of transparency and good governance.
So it's not just about the money directly lost through corrupt activities. It's also about the lost potential for economic growth because investors are scared off.
Right. Creates a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Where a lack of investment leads to slower economic growth, which in turn, perpetuates poverty and inequality.
Right.
Making the country even more vulnerable to corruption.
It's a downward spiral. So how does corruption stifle innovation?
In a corrupt system, success often hinges on who you know or how much you're willing to pay in bribes rather than merit or innovation.
Yeah. So it creates a rigged game where businesses that play by the rules and try to innovate are actually at a disadvantage.
Right.
Why bother coming up with new ideas if the system's rigged against you?
That's the problem. It creates a culture of mediocrity and complacency.
Yeah.
Where innovation is stifled and the economy just stagnates.
It's almost like a brain drain where the most talented and innovative individuals might leave Jamaica to seek opportunities in countries where hard work and ingenuity are rewarded.
It's a real concern.
Yeah.
But despite all these challenges, there is hope. Yeah. There are ways to break this cycle of corruption and create an environment where the economy can thrive.
Okay, that's what I want to hear about. What are some concrete solutions that can make a difference?
Well, it requires a multifaceted approach. We need to address those those root causes of corruption, like poverty and equality. We need to continue to strengthen key institutions, promote transparency, and empower citizens.
Okay, those sound like, big systemic changes.
They are.
How do we even begin to tackle those?
But we need to create economic opportunities.
Yep.
We need to ensure that everyone has a fair chance to succeed. This means investing in education, healthcare, social safety nets to reduce poverty and create a more equitable society. When people have a fair shot at a good life, they're less likely to turn to corrupt practices.
That makes sense. You're addressing the underlying conditions that make corruption more likely. What about strengthening institutions? Where do we even start?
Public procurement is a critical area, as we've discussed. We need to make the process more transparent and accountable, ensuring that contracts are awarded based on merit, not favoritism or bribery.
Okay.
This means implementing competitive bidding, open tendering, and independent oversight.
So it's about making sure that taxpayer money is being spent responsibly and effectively, not disappearing into someone's pocket.
Precisely. And transparency needs to extend beyond just procurement. We need to shed light on beneficial ownership.
Beneficial ownership, remind me what that means again.
So beneficial ownership is about identifying the real individuals who ultimately own or control a company or asset, even if it's hidden behind layers of shell companies.
Okay.
So creating public registries of beneficial ownership information and making that information accessible to law enforcement and journalists can help prevent, money laundering, tax evasion, and other forms of corruption.
So it's about lifting that veil of secrecy and exposing the true owners of these companies and assets.
Exactly.
What about empowering citizens? We talked about, awareness campaigns and reporting mechanisms earlier, but are there other ways to give citizens a more active role in fighting corruption?
One really powerful tool is participatory budgeting.
Okay.
And this allows citizens to have a direct say in how public funds are allocated. Ensuring that resources are being used for projects that truly benefit the community.
So giving people a voice in how their tax dollars are spent.
Exactly.
That's a great idea.
It can be a very effective way to promote transparency, build trust between citizens and the government, and reduce those opportunities for corruption.
Okay, these are all, good ideas, but I have to ask, are they realistic? Can these solutions actually work in a country where corruption seems so deeply rooted?
It's a huge challenge, there's no doubt about that. But I believe change is possible. It requires political will, a commitment from all sectors of society, and sustained effort over time.
So it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
What does a corruption-free Jamaica look like? What are we aiming for?
Imagine businesses thriving on a level playing field. Public services that are efficient and accessible to all. Citizens who trust their government and feel empowered to hold their leaders accountable.
It's a vision of a Jamaica where everyone has a fair chance to succeed. The economy is strong and the future is bright.
That's the dream. It won't be easy. But it's worth fighting for. It's
been an eye-opening conversation so far. We've covered a lot of ground from the harsh realities of corruption to the efforts being made to combat it. And while it's, a daunting challenge, I'm feeling a sense of hope that change is possible.
Hope is essential, but it can't be passive.
Right.
We need to turn that hope into action.
Exactly. This deep dive is about more than just understanding the problem. It's about empowering our listeners to become part of the solution.
And in the next part, we'll zoom out a bit.
Okay.
And look at what Jamaica can learn from other countries in the Caribbean that are also fighting corruption.
So join us next time as we wrap up our deep dive into corruption in Jamaica. Welcome back to the deep dive. So far, we've really uncovered the depths of corruption in Jamaica, but we've also seen, glimmers of hope in the efforts to combat it. So in this final part, we're going beyond Jamaica's borders. We're going to see what we can learn from other Caribbean nations.
Yeah, it's like looking at a map of the region, and seeing different approaches to this common challenge. Some countries have, they've made significant progress, while others kind of serve as cautionary tales.
Right.
So examining these examples can really help us understand, what works, what doesn't, and ultimately what lessons Jamaica can apply.
It's like a regional laboratory of anti-corruption strategies. So which countries are we focusing on today?
Well, Barbados often stands out as a model for the Caribbean. They consistently rank high on Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index, which suggests that they've got something figured out.
They certainly seem to be doing something right. What are some of the key factors behind their success?
One crucial element is their strong emphasis on judicial independence.
Okay.
They have a system that's designed to ensure that judges can make decisions based on the law, free from political pressure or intimidation.
So it's about creating a system where the scales of justice are truly balanced, and where the law applies equally to everyone. That seems fundamental.
It is fundamental.
Yeah.
And this judicial independence creates a sense of accountability that's crucial for deterring corruption. If individuals, even those in high positions, if they know that corrupt actions will have consequences, they're less likely to engage in them.
It's about establishing a clear link between actions and consequences.
Right.
But a strong judiciary is just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Right. Barbados also has a really comprehensive framework of anti-corruption laws and institutions. So they have an Integrity in Public Life Act that requires public officials to be transparent about their assets and income.
Okay.
And they have a Prevention of Corruption Act, which explicitly outlines and criminalizes bribery and other corrupt practices.
So it's not just about having, laws in theory. It's about having a system in place to actually enforce them.
Precisely. And these laws are backed up by specialized agencies like their Financial Intelligence Unit and Director of Public Prosecutions, which have the resources and the authority to investigate and prosecute these corruption cases.
So it sounds like they've created a multi-layered system that's designed to prevent corruption from taking root in the first place.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And, the results speak for themselves. Barbados has seen a significant reduction in corruption, which has had a really positive ripple effect on their economy and society.
It's a powerful example of how, a commitment to transparency and accountability can lead to tangible improvements. Barbados is a relatively small island nation, though.
Yeah.
Are there any larger, more complex Caribbean countries that have made similar progress?
Trinidad and Tobago is an interesting case. While they still face, their share of challenges,
right,
they've made some notable strides in recent years, particularly in reforming their public procurement processes.
We've talked a lot about how public procurement can be like a breeding ground for corruption. What specifically has Trinidad and Tobago done to address this?
They've implemented a really comprehensive program, and it includes measures like competitive bidding for contracts, open and transparent tendering processes, and electronic procurement systems to reduce those opportunities for manipulation.
So they're using technology to kind of make the system more transparent and accountable. And is there like an oversight mechanism to ensure that these reforms are being followed?
Yeah, they've established an independent Office of Procurement Regulation that he oversees the entire process and makes sure that everything's being done by the book.
So it's like having a dedicated referee to ensure fair play in the procurement game. It's encouraging to see these, positive examples. But are there also cases where things, haven't gone so well, countries that illustrate the dangers of unchecked corruption?
Sadly, yes. Haiti is a stark reminder of how devastating, unchecked corruption can really be. It consistently ranks among the most corrupt countries, globally. And this has had a truly crippling effect on their economy, their political stability, and the well-being of their people.
It's a tragic example of how corruption can really erode, the very foundations of a nation. So looking at these contrasting examples, what are some of the key takeaways for Jamaica? What lessons can be learned from both the successes and the failures?
One overarching lesson is that there's no quick fix, right?
Right.
Tackling corruption, it's a long-term commitment.
Yeah.
It requires sustained effort, You have to build strong institutions, promote transparency, and empower citizens.
It's like building a house, You need a strong foundation, and you can't cut corners if you want it to withstand the storms.
Exactly. Another crucial point is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah.
What works in Barbados or Trinidad and Tobago might need to be adapted to fit Jamaica's unique context.
So it's about being inspired by success stories, but not blindly copying them. Right. It's about understanding the underlying principles and adapting them to fit Jamaica's unique situation.
Absolutely. And perhaps the most important lesson is that fighting corruption isn't just the responsibility of the government. Right? Okay. It requires a collective effort from every sector of society, the private sector, civil society organizations, and individual citizens.
It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play. Corruption thrives in silence and apathy. Yeah. It's about speaking out, demanding better from our leaders and making ethical choices in our own lives.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of integrity where corruption is not seen as the norm,
right,
but as an anomaly that we all have a responsibility to challenge and reject.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey. We've explored the depths of corruption in Jamaica.
We have.
But we've also seen, the resilience of those fighting back and the potential for a brighter future.
And it's our hope that this deep dive has empowered you, our listener, to become part of that fight.
Remember, you have a voice. You have a choice.
You do.
And you have the power to demand better. Stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions.
The journey towards a corruption-free Jamaica might be long and challenging, but it's a journey worth taking.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We encourage you to continue, exploring this issue and engaging in conversations and contributing to the movement for a more transparent and accountable Jamaica.
Together, we can create a Jamaica where integrity thrives and the future is bright with possibilities.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better world.